Welcome to our very first episode of Boat Talks on Sophia Sojourn. I am your host, Laura Beth, and this is our venue, Sophia Sojourn. Sophia is a 1976 Burnscraft houseboat. We'll get to know a little bit more about her as our episodes continue. Every month I'm going to invite a guest aboard Sophia, and we are going to sit down and have a conversation. We're going to divide the conversation into 4 parts, and I'll post a new part each week. The first part, we're going to talk about our guest's biography. Oftentimes they will have written a book, so we'll get to talk about that as well. The second part, we are going to talk about their aspirations and their goals in ministry with the church and their specific field of interest. The third part, I'm going to ask 4 questions, the same questions to every single guest that we have. And the fourth and final part, they get to turn the tables, and since this is a two-way conversation, they get to ask me anything they want to. Nothing is off the table. So, our very first guest, the pastor of Serenity Church, a strong recovery-oriented initiative, our pastor John Featherston, and also the author of the soon-to-be classic, Never Alone Again. We had a chance to sit down and talk not too long ago here, so let's get on to part 1, episode 1 of Boat Talks. Episode 1, part 1, which we get to talk about your biography, your biography, and your book, the
recently published, soon to become a modern classic, Never Alone Again. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. And so every Saturday night when we have church, you introduce yourself a very specific way.
I do.
And I'd love for you to just introduce yourself to them.
I stand up. I stand up in front of the congregation, and I start with, my name is John, and I'm a very grateful, recovering drug addict and alcoholic. And by the grace of God, I've been clean and sober for 10,314 days today.
So today.
Today.
Counting every day.
Counting every day.
All right. Now translate that into years for me.
That's over 28 years.
28 years.
October the 15th, 1987.
And you have been in ministry how long?
For 38 years.
For 38 years. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
there's
no
overlap
mathematician, but yeah, there's some overlap with that.
Yeah.
So, not wanting to take away from the book, but pulling right out of the book.
Sure.
The Never Alone Again is really kind of the story of that overlap.
It is.
And what happened, the repercussions of that. So
all of that.
Yeah. Walk us through just a little bit of that.
Okay. I was born into a very, very conservative, fundamentalist sect of Christianity that my family has been in and a part of for 6 generations. The last 5 generations were preachers and pastors, including my dad and my grandfather and my great-grandfather for 200 years. From my birth, I didn't much buy into it. There were some great questions that made no sense to me at all, and that depth of legalism. When I got to college, I began to really struggle with that because I was only given permission to go to one of our denomination's universities. My folks told me, you can go to any college you want to go to. We'll pay for it if you go to one of our denomination's universities. And I got there, and there was a whole generation of us going through together that smelled a rat in where we came from. This did not make sense. It did not add up to what we were coming to understand about Christ. We all kind of made a pact with each other that our job, and I think about the arrogance of it now, it's just mind-boggling. Our job was to rescue our people from bondage. We literally would sit around in groups together and say, you know, this isn't right. This stinks. But we speak the language. We have the roots. We have the heritage. They will not listen to somebody from the outside come in and tell them this is not okay. We are them. Our job is to come in and speak in their language what we're seeing and what we're learning and what God is teaching us about grace. I was a full-grown man before I ever heard my first complete lesson taught on the concept of grace. We didn't touch grace. You never heard it preached. You never heard it taught. it was a suspicious concept to us. So we all launched in and decided that we were going to seek to someday rise to the influential pulpits of our denomination. I sat down, and let me say again, the stunning arrogance of all of this does not miss me. I get it. I sat down in my 20s and made a list of the 10 largest churches in our denomination in America, and made a decision that by my 40th birthday, I was going to stand in one of those pulpits with a venue that would let me make great change and lead my people out. God amused himself.
As he often does when we tell him our plans, yes.
God amused himself and put me in one of those very pulpits right after my 31st birthday. I walked in, 31 years old, a staff of 9 full-time ministers and a support staff 3 times that large. And I was the senior pastor preacher in the big front office of those 9. The next youngest one was our youth pastor, who was exactly 10 years older than me. To say that I jumped into a quagmire over my head would be a grotesque understatement.
Sure. And when you walk into that and here you've had all of these ideals and all of these things, and you know your agenda to be an advocate and an activist in a denomination. I mean, just the administrative piece of that becomes overwhelming. Did you even remember what it was you wanted to change? Or
Mostly from the day I got there, I was trying not to drown. I was just trying to tread water.
Yeah.
In a system like that, as is so often the case, everybody in the mix was protecting their turf and fighting for their piece of the pie, and Washington doesn't know politics compared to a large church staff. And
way too true. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then in our denomination, it was not even the staff. It was not the pastoral staff that had any of the power to make those changes or to make those decisions. In our system, we had a lay board that hired and fired us and made all the decisions, small and large, secular and spiritual.
You had your Congress.
I did.
Yeah.
And I had to get anything through them, and most of them didn't even like each other, So to get
Congress,
it was very much like that.
Yeah.
You had the left and the right and the turf and the
progressives
opinions and
traditionalists
So 3 or 4 years into that, it's a long story, and I'm not here to plug a book, but it'd take hours to tell the story.
Sure,
but
which is why you wrote the book.
Exactly, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
That is why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
I had a history in my early adult life of controlling my feelings with chemicals, both legal and illegal.
Okay.
When I got out of school and went into ministry, I tried pretty much to leave all that behind. But about 3 or 4 years of that nightmare, and I was a mess. And began to find access, first of all, through doctors and other doctors, and a dentist, and the doctor that I conned, and another doctor I got stuff from, would find chemicals to make my hurt go away. I didn't really have a doctrine. I didn't have a theology of a spirit that would step in and control and fix things. We didn't have that in our theology. Basically, our theology was that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, was a retired author.
Okay.
He wrote an excellent book of instructions, gave it to us, and said, read this thoroughly, understand it completely, and follow it meticulously.
And good luck with all that.
And then I'll meet you on the other side and judge how well you did or did not do. So, turning it over to God, I had no theology of that.
Right.
That he would step in miraculously and fix my mess.
Sure.
So finally, all I knew to
all on
do,
your shoulders.
all I knew to do was to make the pain go away. When I ran out of doctors, I found people who weren't doctors who could also sell me stuff to make the pain go Very long story, but within a matter of months, my life was completely out of control. I was taking drugs of one kind or another to get up, to get through the day, and then to finish it up, and spiraled completely out of control.
Yeah, and then probably another drug in the day. And get to sleep for the night.
Until I was just pretty much non-functional. Nobody knew this was going on.
Yeah.
I had very carefully hidden it from anybody that could do me damage with it, which was everybody in my church, I was sure. You know. When I finally, when I finally realized that I was in danger, out of control, and tried desperately to back up on this path I was on, and couldn't back up. I couldn't stop. Found the fellowships of Narcotics Anonymous. I found the 12-step fellowships.
Okay.
And literally how that happened, I was sitting at my desk in my office at the church, still high from the night before, not able to possibly function or be creative in the sermon I was supposed to be writing, while still high on dope from the night before.
Yeah.
And just sat there and sobbed. And I, who do I tell that to?
Your spiritual leaders are your bosses.
Oh, yeah.
They're holding the purse strings to your life.
Absolutely, and my life in their hands.
Yeah.
Most people would go to a pastor for help at a time like that. But, who does the pastor go to?
Pastor's pastor. Yeah.
I didn't have a pastor's pastor.
Yeah.
I had been working with somebody who I'd been visiting with the week before in our church, and I invited him to go somewhere after we had had supper. And he said, no, I think I want to go tonight to a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. I knew nothing. First time I'd ever heard that phrase. I knew nothing about Narcotics Anonymous. I assumed it was something kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous, but I didn't know anything about them either.
Yeah.
But when I was sitting at my desk that day, that was the only thing I could think. And I called information, got a number. And called, a nice lady answered. I said, I'm in big trouble. I don't know what to do. This was late morning. She said, at noon, go to this address in downtown Dallas and walk in there and tell them what you just told me, and they'll tell you what to do. And so began my journey.
When you called her, did you say, this is senior pastor so-and-so? No.
No. I said, I'm John and I'm in trouble.
Okay.
So where do I go and what do I do?
Okay. So went downtown.
Went downtown Dallas, and that was in the 1980s. We didn't have GPS. We didn't have cell phones. 1987.
You had your maps go out?
I had my maps go.
Yes.
I had the large book of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I'd gotten it out, and I'd found the address. It was on the bad end of the wrong end of the sad end of downtown Dallas. It's interesting. Every now and then I will drive by that neighborhood today, and now it's all, expensive lofts and high-tech startups.
Sure, yeah.
and yuppie watering holes today.
Yes.
But then it was just a really scary part of downtown Dallas. And I got down there and
You just said yuppie watering holes. That is still a scary part of downtown Dallas for sure.
But that's another story.
But we digress.
Yeah, but we digress.
Yes.
That's another episode. Yeah. And I drove down there in my new Mercedes and my custom-made suit and my tailored, pinpoint Oxford shirt and Italian loafers, because I had to look the part of a successful suburban pastor, So I drive down there and I park on the curb and I can't find this place. And finally, it was boarded up storefronts. There was a defunct gas station. There was a kind of a sad-looking auto parts place, and I just went in and asked, "Is this 4314 or whatever the address was?" And they said, "No, this ain't it. This ain't it." And so finally, shortly before noon, I thought, I can't leave. This is the only place I know to get help, and I've got to have help.
Yeah.
And I have no other place I know to go.
The last lifeline.
This is it.
Yeah.
So I stood there on the sidewalk, and about 5 or 10 minutes till 12, the craziest grab bag of humanity you can imagine began to work their way down this dirt alley between a boarded up storefront and a boarded up old gas station in a dirt alley. And I just stood and watched. There were some real expensive looking downtown Dallas yuppies. Obviously very successful business types were going down that alley. There was some working class people in uniforms and stuff, and lunch pails, going down that same alley. And what looked like some homeless people shuffling down that alley. And finally, right before noon, in a cloud of dust, this huge Harley biker comes roaring on his hog down the street and takes that bike down that alley. And leather and chains and a roar of dust, and I said to myself, John, you're probably going to die here. But that alley is the only place you haven't asked.
Yeah.
So I walked down the alley to the back of the alley in a rolled up warehouse door. And I stuck my head around the corner, and there was all those people I had seen were sitting in a big circle of folding chairs, drinking coffee, and every one of them smoking. And I looked through the fog of the smoke at these people sitting there, and I said, can anybody tell me where 4314 is? And they said, you found it. Welcome home.
And I hope you'll come back next week and join me for part 2 of my conversation with John in Featherston, and we will look at his aspirations for ministry and the church and things that he thinks need to happen for the church to be a more effective and safer place for more people in our world. Don't forget to check out our blog, sophiasojourn.com, and look for my book coming out soon, Shattering Masks. I'll keep you posted. Have a great week.